System of a Down were formed in 1994 in Glendale, California by Serj Tankian, Darren Malakian, and Shavo Odagian, all alumni of the Rose and Alex Pilibos Armenian School in Los Angeles. It's worth mentioning that only Shavo was born in Armenia, but all of them have Armenian roots and lived in Armenian communities, which is reflected in their music. Serj did not attend the school at the same time, as he was almost a decade older than the others, but the trio all had their own projects at the same recording studio, as bassist Shavo discussed in an interview on the Ernie Ball podcast.
I rehearsed with this band called Roswell. In that complex, an old friend of mine was also jamming. He had this band, it was like an 80s vibe like band, and he was like, I have a guitar player coming in, stick around, I want to hear what you have to say about this person, right? And I was like, okay, sure. He wanted my opinion because, we played together, he liked my suggestions, my opinions. In walks Darren, and I'm like, I remember this kid from somewhere, He went to school with us.
The trio would find themselves together with another drummer in a short-lived act, Soil, and from there would eventually go on to form the Titans known as System of a Down. To learn how this original, eclectic, and talented group of diaspora descendants became the greatest band of all time, stick around to the end of this video. Welcome to Band History. System of a Down is a band that I discovered in middle school when I was getting into Flash animation. For those who don't know, Flash was a program used for making various animations and games. Ah yes, the halcyon days of the internet, when it was far more colorful and innocent. Anyway, I was making a fighting stick figure animation and I was looking for the perfect song to put over it. A friend of mine recommended a song by the name of B.Y.O.B. Why do they always send the poor? 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 I didn't know it then, but by the time I discovered them, they had already released their last album. As for my favorites, in short, I love every System of a Down album. As you may have figured out, System is my favorite band of all time. Now on my horror channel CZ's World, I've put off making a dedicated episode on my favorite horror movie of all time for like 8 years out of nervousness that I won't do it justice. So for my music channel, I decided to rip off the Band-Aid early and talk about System in year 1. Every SoaD release has offered up something different and awesome, from the self-titled debut's swaps between chilled out bass lines, powerful riffs, and upbeat near chaos, to Toxicity's catchy, easy to sing songs, all the way to Mezmerize's amazing vocal contrast between Serj and Darren, and everything in between. But before we get to all of these, we need to dig back and see just where these guys came from. During their earliest years, the band that would eventually become known as System of a Down formed from the ashes of a band called Soil. No, not Soil from 1997. Soil's lineup consisted of Serj, Darren, a drummer named Domingo Lariano, and a bassist, Dave Hakopian. At the time, Shavo would rehearse with his band, then run next door to hang out with them. They had grown closer as friends over the time of sharing the rehearsal space. There was no room for him to join the band at that moment, but they asked him instead to be their manager and promoter, as he knew all about that kind of stuff. He agreed, and the band booked one club gig. It was suggested by a girl that Shavo was seeing at the time that he also speak to Zach De La Rocha of Rage Against the Machine to try to get the band booked at one of his house parties, but he never got the chance to speak with Zach directly, despite meeting Tom Morello at one. Soon after, Dave called Shavo and asked him to join the band in his wake, as he was looking to leave and thought that the band was going to ask Shavo to join as their bassist. He fit in well and was already managing them. Then, Shavo got a call from Darren informing him that their drummer was leaving as well. While normally a mass exodus like this could spell doom for a band, this one turned out to be not so bad. Shavo agreed to join. He was hesitant at first, not wanting to take the spot from a friend, but now that the band seemed to be building into something new, he felt much better about it. As they talked more and more, they agreed that it would be better to get a fresh start, a new drummer, a new band, and a mostly new set of songs. Essentially, breaking up Soil, Serj, Darren, and Shavo formed a new band along with a drummer that they found by the name of Antranik Andy Kachurian, which at the time they decided to name Victims of a Down. The name was taken from a poem that Darren had written, which was featured later on the back of their self-titled debut. But the name was changed. Shavo suggested the name System of a Down as it would have a better chance of catching fans' eyes, and also so that they would be alphabetically filed closer to one of their favorite bands, Slayer. You will learn more and more that these guys really like Slayer. System of a Down would record a series of demos, 5 of them to be exact, between 1995 and 1997. The first, which is known by fans as the untitled 1995 demo tape, was never officially released. Demo tapes 1 and 2 were released in May 1995 and May 1996 respectively. Demo tape 3 came out in late 1996 with a hidden untitled track named Ginger, also known as the Missing Song. This demo was re-released in 1997 without Ginger, which was more or less just a jam session anyway. The songs on these demo tapes were early versions of later released tracks, some of which are difficult to recognize compared to their debut album counterparts, while others vaguely resemble the final versions. Of course, some unreleased demos wouldn't stay unreleased, but we'll get to that story later. Demo tape 3 in particular was notable because the first release credited Andy Kachurian as the drummer, and the second credited John Dolmayan. The songs on this release, mixes aside, were basically identical to what would be on their self-titled, with War even being the version used in the music video later on. The band's first gig was played on May 28, 1995 at the Roxy Theater in West Hollywood, California. Only about 10 seconds of footage, without sound, exists from this gig, which was filmed by Shavo's father. Shavo talked more about this in an interview with Loudwire. It was a Sunday night. They didn't know what we sounded like because we didn't have a demo tape, so they put us on a ska night with 6 ska bands. We sold 150 tickets, and the venue owners tripped out. When we went on stage, chaos broke out. There were people hanging from the rafters, there was a pit, my dad was there filming it. After that, it was very easy for us to get shows. No one asked us for a demo, no one asked to sell tickets, they just booked us. The band would go on to play many gigs around LA and West Hollywood in 1995 and 1996, before joining up with Slayer on their Undisputed Attitude tour for a show at the Aztlan Theater in Denver on August 21st, 1996. Unfortunately, no footage of this has been uncovered yet, so it may be lost media by now. Being able to play with one of their favorite bands had to be something special for the young band, and later, this would blossom into another tour, which I'll touch on in a little bit. During their busy touring schedule, especially for a group that had not even released a full length yet, System of a Down would appear on one more recording called High Ang, an Armenian compilation album from 1997. This would feature an early version of their song Pluck. All the band's touring and hard work was getting harder to ignore. Their big break came not too long after their one and only lineup change. System of a Down is one of those bands with an incredibly stable lineup. Their only change came when drummer Kachaturian was replaced by John Dolmayan in 1997 due to Kachaturian injuring his hand. The lineup would remain intact and unchanging throughout the band's discography, and to this very day. After John joined, Rick Rubin, the head of American Recordings and founder of Def Jam Records, happened to catch one of their gigs at the legendary Viper Room, and was rather surprised to see the band had not been signed yet, and the band was signed to American. In early 1998, they finally began work on their self-titled album. Recording of System of a Down's debut album would happen at 2 studios. The first was Sound City Studios, famous for being the home of many recordings, including Nirvana's Nevermind, Tool's Undertow, and Rage Against the Machine's self-titled album. And the second was producer Rick Rubin's own studio, known as The Mansion. The band was not only well rehearsed from all the gigs they had played, but incredibly excited to record, as Serge told in an interview with Metal Hammer. It was easy to make. Rick's idea was, you guys are so crazy on stage in terms of sound and dynamics, I just wanted to record it as is, as live as possible. We did the vocals at Rick's mansion in a tent because the room was not built as a studio. It was a study room with windows and cement, so we set up a tent in the middle of the room and put in antique furniture, and it turned out so cool. The album was released on June 30th, 1998. Consisting of 13 songs across 40 minutes, it bounced around the room with an eclectic combination of vicious heavy metal, wild jazzy bits, and even chilled out bass lines from time to time. System of a Down kicks off with Sweet Pea, whose scratchy guitar intro became many a fan's ringtone back in the day. Yes, we used to download ringtones for our phones. It was a different time, okay? Sweet Pea breaks down into an almost sludgy death metal inspired breakdown at about a minute in, quickly shifting to one of their heavier songs. No is a groovy metal romp that would come into play in an interesting way on a future tour, which we'll discuss in a little bit. Next up would be the fans' first single, simply known as Sugar. Sugar, like many System songs, has been suggested to have multiple meanings. The word is a euphemism for an illegal substance, but it's also been speculated to refer to the population's drug-like reliance on actual sugar. The music video has a flash that says aspartame kills. The video itself starts out with a newscaster, my man Eric Olas, reading out that night's stories, from horrible war-related news to the winner of a local dog show. Then he goes glasses off, informing the audience that he can't deliver more pertinent news because the station has to keep their ratings up.
They've got you running in circles, 9 to 5, then 5 to 9, you're mine. I tell you what they want you to know, and you consider it the truth. Nobody is opening their eyes!
He basically crashes out, revealing the truth and telling the audience that he works for the system. Then, the band, in a mix of face paint, outlandish clothing, and gas masks, performs in front of an American flag. And we see video clips of sensationalist American news, everything from the rat race, to police riots, to marching troops, to the questioning of a subject, to an old lady at a park with a weapon in her purse. Sugar happens to be one of my personal favorites from this album. Another personal favorite here is Soil, with its frantic jazzy metal influence, and War, a fast and furious pit pleaser where Serge's screams almost hit those extreme metal levels again. Spiders is the second single from the album, and is notable for being featured in two places, on the soundtrack for Scream 3, and many years later in Rock Band 4. The video for Spiders has an almost surreal, dreamlike quality to it, with the band in various kind of tribal-looking costumes. We see a woman floating in a dystopian medical tank being watched by scientists. There's also a storyline that seems to take place in the woman's mind, where she's delivering this giant seed-looking thing to a boss character with long arms. It's not the easiest video to describe or interpret, but it takes late 90s artsy video and runs with that concept. Although it's more of a deep cut, I have to talk about Marmalade, which appeared on the Japanese version of the album as the 14th track, and was featured on the movie soundtrack for the 1998 thriller Strangeland. Strangeland was written by none other than one of the metal godfathers, Dee Snider of Twisted Sister. Focused on the rites of body modification rituals, Snider plays a heavily pierced man by the name of Captain Howdy, and finds his targets via the internet. Mixing heavy metal and horror always seems to be a match made in heaven. The songs on this album ascribe to a punk-like spirit and tend to be rather short. With the exception of Mind, Spiders, Peephole, and Pluck, they're all under 3 minutes, but managed to say plenty in that time, sometimes shifting styles multiple times within each song. D-Devil is the shortest song on the album at under 2 minutes and is a groovy, swingy affair. As a little side note, D-Devil Music happens to be the label that produced System of a Down's albums. Pluck is an acronym for Politically Lying, Unholy, Cowardly Killers, and sets the stage well for the band's strong political messages, especially in regards to their homeland and the Armenian genocide. In the booklet, you'll find a dedication. System of a Down would like to dedicate the song to the memory of the 1.5 million victims of the Armenian genocide perpetuated by the Turkish government in 1915. From the beginning, System was driven by their goal to educate people on the Armenian genocide and push to get it recognized for what it was. They don't only call out the government that perpetuated it, but governments that refuse to acknowledge it due to political alliances with Turkey. The idea is that not acknowledging it is what allows these kind of atrocities to continue to happen. So although System of a Down is often labeled as political, I almost view their message more as setting politics aside to prevent human suffering. Beyond just the lyrics, however, the band has always incorporated traditional Armenian melodies and folk influences into their music, further diversifying their sound and paying tribute to their homeland at the same time. And I feel like that also contributes to their mission statement, because fans who fall in love with these melodies and try to learn more about the music will ultimately be funneled to the message that they're trying to convey. The debut's album cover was originally featured on a print from an old German political artist, John Hartfield. Back in 1928, he created this iconic anti-fascist poster. The slogan on the poster reads, "5 fingers has the hand. With 5, you seize the enemy." The hand has 5 fingers was referenced in Darren's poem, tying it all together in a neat package. With the release of their first full album, of course, came yet more touring, branching out to a whole lot more than California. They'd not only be going around America, but all around the world. As I mentioned earlier, System of a Down had played one gig with Slayer back in 1996, but now they actually got to head out with the band in full on their Diabolus in Musica tour as the opening act. It would be somewhat of a heavy metal boot camp for the guys, but the band was determined to make it work. Because let's face it, not many new artists on their very first tour get to open for their heroes. The tour kicked off on May 27, 1998 and would run through June 17, though they would play some more gigs with them later on that year. Now you have to keep in mind that System of a Down and Slayer on a non-festival bill together was a case of the new guys opening for the long runners. Certain fans might just show up for one or the other. Despite thrash metal being one influence, SoaD was never inspired by one single style, and they'd only really toured around California, so they had to contend with one of the more challenging crowds of their careers so far, metalheads in their 20s and 30s, who were very likely inebriated. Slayer themselves were wonderful to their opening act, with John going on record to say that Tom Araya offered to help if they had any problems, and would watch them every night, being supportive. The fans were another story. Many people who go to a gig to see the headlining act do not care for the opener, but System of a Down wasn't going to quit. They were ready to make people like them. Darren Malakian speaks about this in a 2014 interview. I said, "Look, if these guys don't applaud for us after we play the first song, No, we're gonna play it again, over and over until they react." We played No and the crowd was pretty silent. So John started No again, and we played it. Halfway through the song, they were actually cheering for us. My attitude was, you're gonna love us whether you like it or not, and if you don't, you're gonna hear this song over and over again. Against all odds, this worked. You have to appreciate the gall they had to pull this off, especially in front of that crowd. It was almost something out of a movie, where the scrappy underdog pulls off a gutsy move mid-fight, and the bully just steps back out of respect. It's one of my favorite early System of a Down lore stories. After wrapping the tour rather successfully, given the challenges, another tour followed soon after. They would be added to the lineup of Ozzfest that same year as a main stage opener. For some of the younger crowd, Ozzfest was a heavy metal festival founded by Ozzy and Sharon Osbourne in 1996 and ran almost every year until 2018. Its earlier years served as a haven for introducing a lot of lesser-known bands to a wider audience, and System of a Down's main stage appearance was a huge boon for the band. It helped push their single, Sugar, up the charts. While their debut album didn't fly up the charts immediately, peaking at 124 on the Billboard 200, between tours and publicity, it gained a lot of goodwill with fans and would cement the band in the collective consciousness of the masses. Another notable outing they had in this time was the 2000 Summer Sanitarium Tour. With Metallica headlining, they snagged the opening spot on a bill also featuring Power Man 5000, Kid Rock, and Korn. This was somewhat notable as being the tour where Metallica frontman James Hetfield ended up injuring himself in a jet ski accident before their stop at Kentucky Speedway. Rather than cancel the upcoming show, members of the other bands on the tour would join Metallica on stage for certain songs, with Serj and Darren appearing on the medley of Master of Puppets and Home Sanitarium. They even did some more soundtrack work that year, covering Berlin's song The Metro, which appeared in the horror movie Dracula 2000. However, contrary to popular belief, they never did a song for or about The Legend of Zelda, although crossing my favorite band over with my favorite game franchise would have been the greatest thing of my entire life. For those who weren't around at the time, the alleged story was that System of a Down had written a sort of tribute song about the Zelda series. The song was actually written by a man named Joe Plyman of Rabbit Joint back in 1998, but it eventually ended up on Napster under the names SoaD Zelda or System of a Down Zelda, and later on YouTube with similar titles. It was likely due to Joe's voice sounding very similar to Serj, especially on System's more upbeat theatrical tracks, but it was nonetheless an amusing footnote during the time of Napster and LimeWire.
Link, here come to town, come to save the Princess Zelda.
It was downloaded thousands of times, likely at 1 megabyte per second at best, and like many things on the internet is a massive example of misinformation. Many fans still wonder why System of a Down never plays their Legend of Zelda song anymore. All in all, it was an extremely successful debut album and over 2 years of touring, but no one knew what was to come. It turns out that their next album would launch them to heights that not even they expected. In March of 2001, the band entered Cello Studios and began recording a plethora of new material. They would produce far more than they would end up using on the album, over 30 songs, but they narrowed it down to 14. These 14 would make up their incredibly powerful follow-up, Toxicity. Serj and Darren went into the sophomore album's evolved sound a little bit with MTV2.
I think it's because me and him do more vocal harmonies in certain parts. I mean, if you know System of a Down music, you know it goes from one place to another within a second. We'll go through a really heavy thrash part, and then me and him will do like this really pretty, beautiful vocal melody type of thing, and that was something that you couldn't find on the last record.
The album was released on September 4th, 2001, and would immediately take the rock and metal world by storm. Toxicity is the most commercially successful of their albums, making it a blast to enjoy with others. My friends and I used to sing Prison Song in the back of the school bus, and Chop Suey is a karaoke/rock band classic to duet.
Following direction when to climb down with your iron fist, drugs became conveniently available for all the kids.
Opening with Prison Song and ending with Arto, a hidden track which is a traditional sounding Armenian folk song featuring a musician by the name of Arto Tunçaboysian, their sophomore effort showed a maturity and willingness to branch out. The band would continue to wear their favorite influences on their sleeves. Given Arto is a hidden track, Aerials is the true closer, but I have to mention the song because it shows their dedication to paying homage to their homeland and to their people. Despite its erratic, almost goofy sound, Chop Suey is actually about drug addiction, as Shavo told MTV. The song is named Chop Suey because that's really what we are musically. To me, it's about drug addiction, but we've taken something really serious and made it a little wacky. The Chop Suey video was filmed on August 6, 2001 in LA's Little Armenia. Roughly 1,000 fans ended up appearing in the video, and to this day you can hear accounts of fans who were part of the crowd. Toxicity shows off the band's many influences and styles, from the mellow, slower pace of Aerials to the driving, thrashy sounds of Bounce, which can ignite any pit with even the faintest pulse.
With System of a Down, go!
Bounce also appeared in 2016's The Secret Life of Pets, which I was absolutely delighted to find out when I saw the trailer. A fun fact about this song, it was originally written about pajamas of all things, but they changed it to be about jumping around instead.
You know, there was a song about pajamas, but we changed the lyrics to that one. Now it's about jumping around.
Which makes for a much more fun time during the live performances.
I want you people to jump. Pogo, 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 pogo. Up, pogo, 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 pogo. Down, pogo, pogo, pogo. Up, pogo, pogo, pogo. This place up. Pogo, 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 pogo.
As for other soundtrack appearances, Chop Suey briefly appeared in Sing 2. X stands out as a heavy, almost sludgy affair at times, with Serj showing his vocal range, hitting some vicious death metal-esque growls. Serj was showcasing his ability to sing in just about any style more and more, something that made him stand out above many of his contemporaries in the metal genre. The guys even changed things up some during the recording. With Rick Rubin producing again, some of it was recorded at his house. Serj decided to get creative with the vocals. He wanted to push himself in ways he never had before. At one point, they even hung him upside down on one of Rubin's exercise machines and recorded him that way, turning the session on its head, if you you will. The band even ended up having some light physical altercations during the recording, mostly due to some lyrical content, but Rick Rubin thought that it just showed how serious they were about their music. In fact, during the writing, there was an incident over a single lyric, if you can believe it, that almost broke up the band. Serge clashed with Darren and Chavo over a line in the song Needles, and according to Rick Rubin, the tension was so intense that it could have spelled the end of the group. Originally, the chorus was "pull the tapeworm out of my ass." Darren and Chavo didn't like my ass. They were like, no, that doesn't sound cool, that sounds bad, that sounds vulnerable, or whatever it was. Whatever word you want to use as an adjective. I'm like, what I'm trying to say is philosophical, take this negativity out of me. I think it's the metal attitude versus the non-metal attitude as well. For me, I like showing vulnerability in our music. I don't mind showing it because I think as an artist, you're vulnerable either way. You either show it or you don't. But the metal attitude is, no way dude, we're metal. I think that's what it was more than anything else. The title track, Toxicity, was the album's second single, released on January 2nd, 2002. It had an accompanying music video, though it was a simple affair of the band performing on a white cyc and on stage. The very end of the video shows the crowd blend into a galaxy, perhaps maybe symbolizing how small we are in the grand scheme of things. Toxicity's melody is unmistakable, its gentle opening giving way to that chorus that showcased more of Serge's powerful voice. Like Chop Suey, it received a lot of radio play, as did Aerials. Everyone seems to know Aerials, the third single. The song's video, which was widely played on MTV, featured the band performing in a dingy-looking circus tent set in the mountains, with a story following this strange little boy who looks like an alien going to a car show, riding around with models in a convertible, attending glitzy red carpets and glamorous photo shoots. At the end, he approaches the big top stage that the band had been performing on, decorated with strange hieroglyphics, and lays down with a somber expression. The meaning is, as always, a bit ambiguous, but could represent the band feeling like outsiders or aliens in this new world of Hollywood stardom. Aerials was their highest charting single at this time, though it would later be supplanted. Toxicity would reach incredible heights, but would also have a few notable incidents surrounding it. None of which were the band's or the album's fault, it just came out at what would be a very, very chaotic time, and as a result, the band ended up entangled in controversy. They weathered it like champs, but it certainly was quite the barrage. The first incident was a riot in LA after a Toxicity release show was cancelled. The concert was free, and too many people showed up for it, surpassing the venue's allowed capacity. The fire marshal shut it down, and fights ensued, devolving into a riot.
They said the fire marshal closed it down, and I said, well, what if we go at least announce and play a few shows and say, you know, it's closed down, so we can't really finish the show, we'll do another show later for you all. They said, no, you can't do that, the police will arrest you if you try to go to the stage. And we're like, okay, well, are they gonna announce that, you know? Like, nobody announced. So I called the guys over and I said, let's get arrested even better. You know, like, right? Let's do this.
They ended up not doing that on the advice of their lawyer, but felt bad for the fans who had waited out for them. Toxicity reached #1 on the Billboard album charts in a rather infamous date in America in September 2001. If you were alive during that time and old enough, you probably remember exactly where you were when you heard about it. And if you were born afterward, you surely learned about it in school. A quote from a Metal Injection interview with Chavo detailed their experience. I woke up in the morning with my phone blowing up. It was the last couple of days at home I was really trying to get, knowing I'm going on a full tour in a couple of days. I answered the phone and it was my mom, and my mom said, turn the TV on, there's chaos happening in America. I turned the TV on. It was like 9:15 and I saw the tower fall. My phone beeped and I went to the other line and it was my manager, and he goes, congratulations, you're #1 on Billboard. In the same thought process of what's happening in New York, I'm in LA. And then, oh, whoa, we just went #1. And remember, it was our second record. We weren't famous yet. We had a record, we toured, we came back home, and we wrote this other record and we released it. This was gonna be our first tour in front of our second sophomore record. Until today, when people ask me, it's bittersweet about the #1. It was such a weird time. In the wake of the tragedy, the entertainment world saw lyrics and sometimes entire songs being censored. Song lyrics that could be considered questionable, too dark, violent, or even just mentioning New York could go under the censor's knife and end up temporarily banned from radio play in America. The genre didn't matter. Artists from Metallica to Phil Collins to even Frank Sinatra were pulled from play. Chop Suey was one of these songs. The lyric, self-righteous blank, was deemed too much for broadcast. Eventually, both MTV and the radio would come around and start playing their tracks. Serge even had to verbally battle it out with Howard Stern after the DJ took offense to some of his words about the oil situation overseas. But touring would also present some of its own challenges. System of a Down would run into some more issues while touring for Toxicity. The Pledge of Allegiance tour was originally slated to start September 14th, but was pushed back due to geopolitical events in September 2001. Once again, Darren would join a band on stage to help out. Rammstein guitarist Paul Landers had to leave the country suddenly for an emergency back home in Germany, and on their October 26th gig, Darren stepped up to play guitar for them, demonstrating his raw ability. It would seem that Darren can fill in for practically anyone. If you're looking for rare memorabilia, a compilation CD/sampler exists featuring all the bands that played on this tour, which includes SoaD's Prison Song. Even some individual gigs were affected. Given the change in attitude toward anyone either from or perceived to be from the Middle East, Chavo was beaten and harassed by guards at one of the band's gigs in fall of 2001, which resulted in him suing the security guy. But they powered through and continued touring through 2001 and well into 2002 in support of the album. All in all, if the self-titled put the band on the map, Toxicity pushed them well to the forefront. They even had some more soundtrack material. That cover they did of the Metro from Berlin appeared in Not Another Teen Movie, and they had another song, Streamline, which made its appearance on the soundtrack to The Scorpion King in early 2002. Streamline would appear on an album shortly after, but their next release would not be a typical album.
I cry when angels deserve to die.
Out of all of System of a Down's releases, I think their third effort might actually be their most consistent album. Featuring a lot of short songs, this one flew somewhat under the radar compared to their previous offerings. This may have something to do with the circumstances of the release, and maybe even the title and cover art, but for what it's worth, I think it's right up there with their other stuff. The album's name stems from the fact that a lot of unreleased songs from Toxicity were leaked online, and downloaded by thousands. Unofficially, it went by the name Toxicity 2 by fans. To this day, the source of the leak remains unknown. When it comes to the music world, many people can end up involved in the recording, mixing, and distribution of an album. All it takes is one person to slide stuff under the radar. This has happened for years. Demo tapes would be spread around the underground, but with the advent of the internet, it became much easier and would spread much faster. This bootleg was spread so far and wide that Alternative Press, an official publication that had been around for nearly 17 years, actually reviewed the unreleased songs. System of a Down was not so much incensed as they were disappointed. It's understandable that an artist can get frustrated when the material gets leaked in an unfinished state. But at the same time, they wanted fans to actually hear the music in a more proper and finished form. Steal This Album seemed to be the perfect way to do it, allowing them to vent their frustrations by making a mockery of the people who exploited them. The band would keep control of the music, releasing it on their own terms, and fans would get to hear the songs, though as Darren told Billboard, it took him a little while to warm up to the idea.
If these songs had never leaked on the web, I never would have agreed to release them.
Early on, I wasn't excited about this album. The turning point to me was when I sat down and listened to what the kids were hearing. My backing vocals weren't on the songs, and at least 10 guitar tracks were missing. It was as if you covered your ears and listened to an early mix. It didn't piss me off, but these songs deserved to be heard with all the colors, and they weren't. That said, it wouldn't be right to call this album a bunch of low-quality demos and outtakes. It's actually the favorite of both Serj and John, as Serj mentioned in a statement. We don't consider any of these songs to be B-sides or outtakes. The songs that didn't make it onto Toxicity are as good as, if not better than the songs that did. They weren't originally included because they didn't fit the overall continuity of the album, and we're happy that our fans will be able to hear them in their completed form. This album was handled a little differently from the rest, evident in everything from the packaging to the singles. Unlike the other albums, Steal This Album was packaged in a clear case with a white insert and no credits at all, keeping with the spirit of the material being leaked and likely burned to CDs by fans. People could access the lyrics and full credits via the band's official website, or by putting their CD into their PC's CD-ROM player. Don't you just love 90s tech? My personal favorites on this one are smack dab in the middle, the slow-building, atmospheric Mr. Jack, and the oddly named IEAIAIO, which I say is a funny name, but if it was named something else, we would probably still call it that because of the fact that the rest of Serj's rapid-fire lyrics are almost too fast to process, making its iconic chorus one of the only parts that fans can successfully repeat. This was also the only song that John has a writing credit on. The lyrics, "Meeting John Dales Jr. winked an eye and point a finger," are inspired by John's chance encounter with David Hasselhoff at a liquor store called Dales Jr., where Hasselhoff actually winked and shot him some finger guns. The IEAIAIO chorus comes from English occultist Aleister Crowley, who is said to have forced his students to chant something along these lines, then swap to Old MacDonald. Students breaking down into laughter would be forced to do it again. It's not often that you hear a song whose inspiration combines both the Hoff and Aleister Crowley, but that's just the kind of thing that System of a Down does. Steal This Album's first single was Inner Vision, released in October 2002. It's more of a promotional single, and was one of the songs that, while leaked, didn't appear on the Toxicity 2 bootleg. Notably, it's the only single from the band's original run that didn't have a music video, and was only played on radio stations. The leaked version of the song is slightly different from the album version, with a minor change of lyrics and a somewhat different arrangement. The single's front cover followed a similar design to the album, a bare-bones black writing on white background, keeping with the bootleg theme. It also hasn't been played live a whole lot, though it has gotten more love than the album's second single. Boom was only ever played once in concert, and no footage of it exists to anyone's knowledge. It's a personal bucket list item for me to see every song of theirs performed live at some point, and this is one of the tracks that's holding me up. The song was apparently played at the Hollywood Palladium in 2003, but due to apparent restrictions, very limited footage of that concert exists. The only song recorded that night was Prison Song. So if anyone has footage of this or knows someone who was there, please come forward. Fans have been searching for this sonic holy grail for over 2 decades. Their next video wouldn't have any sort of surrealistic inspirations, but be far more rooted in its political message. Steal This album's second single, Boom, did not hold back any of the band's thoughts in its music video. It was an explicit denunciation of the US war in Iraq, something that they were openly against. It featured footage from the worldwide protests that were going on during that time, featuring the bands taking part in these protests, filming and getting members of the crowd to sing along. Shot in a more rough, raw style, the protest shots were punctuated by footage of dropping bombs and ending with what seems to be a memorial to the innocent victims lost. The video's intro says it all. On February 15, 2003, 10 million people in over 600 cities around the world participated in the largest peace demonstration in the history of the world. Because we choose peace over war, we were there too. While their political message remained, this album also ventured into areas that System of a Down hadn't explored much on their other records. The melodies dipped into more chill territory from time to time, and some songs took on an almost surreal quality. The album changed things up lyrically as well, dealing with themes of love and loss that weren't prevalent on the band's previous releases, yet they were present here in songs like Roulette and Streamline. Different or not, Steal This album peaked at number 15 on the Billboard Top 200, a solid feat for an album as offbeat as this one. After this album, there would be a bit of time before we saw something more from them. They would play a handful of live dates and had their song Shimmy appear in Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4, but otherwise the band was somewhat quiet. They weren't completely inactive, however. In 2003, Darren would start to jam a bit with some friends of his, Casey Chaos from the band Amen, and a drummer named Zach Hill. Nothing was released officially, and the three went their separate ways, but I'll be getting back to this a little bit later. Darren also ended up creating his own music label called Eat Your Music. He wanted to use it to sign bands who didn't have proper distribution, at least stateside. The criteria of the label was just that he was a fan of the band. I honestly feel that if you're going to sign an artist, the most important thing is that you've really got to be like one of those kids in their audience. I will only sign and work with those artists that I'm a fan of. Darren managed to sign 2 other bands, Amen, the alternative metal / punk rock band from Los Angeles that I mentioned earlier, and Satyricon, a seminal black metal band from Norway who had distribution in Europe, but their latest album at the time wasn't released stateside. But System of a Down's next offering would continue to be a little different, though in this case it was how they were released.
The reason that this is the intro to the first album is because we feel both albums are connected and they're really one album. So actually when you get both albums, they will fit together like a puzzle, you know, and then you'll have one double CD. And the reason we basically did this is because we really wanted people to take their time with each song. And when you have 25 songs to listen to, you have less time for each song, you know. So we released one and then the other, that way you can really concentrate on each one.
Even though it took 3 years, System of a Down would soon gift the world with new music, and the wait was well worth it. Or at least I imagine it was, because I was still a kid and did not know about the band yet. In 2005, they released not 1, but 2 albums. Mezmerize, the first of the pair, would be released on May 17th, while Hypnotize would be dropped 6 months later on November 22. They're considered to be 2 pieces of a whole, a double album, just released separately. Darren explained the concept in a 2005 interview. The songs were written at the same time with the same feel or vibe in the air. I didn't separate the songs based on hooky or non-hooky. Whatever you hear there is coincidence. These albums would feature Serge and Darren sharing vocal duties far more than before, which I think worked out beautifully. They complement each other really well. Serge's powerful, melodic, almost operatic vocals mesh with Darren's higher, more Western-sounding voice. Darren's occasional screams and vocal harmony with Serge are the biggest elements of Mezmerize and Hypnotize's identity. Their instrumental style continued to branch out as well. Songs like Revenga showed off their more extreme influences and musical tastes. Darren's appreciation of black metal comes out clearly in some of the riffs, while Radio Video was a track full of variety, touching on everything from reggae to even a touch of polka. No style is off limits for this band. Mezmerize's first single, B.Y.O.B, or Bring Your Own Bombs, became their highest charting track to date, reaching number 27 and marking their only Billboard Top 40 hits. It also won a Grammy Award for Best Hard Rock Performance. Serge was rather surprised.
I'm Serge Tankian. I'm the lead singer of System of a Down. So we never really thought about the Grammys until we were nominated, to be completely honest. We always thought it was more of a pop kind of thing that people get, you know, that do these pop records and stuff. We never thought of ourselves as a band that could ever get nominated, let alone win one. And then we got nominated for one, and then years later we won one.
B.Y.O.B is definitely one of my favorite tracks off the album. Much like Boom, B.Y.O.B was written as a protest against the Iraq War, with lyrics that left no ambiguity about its message or the band's stance. System of a Down has always been outspoken in their opposition to war, and the message still feels relevant. It could be applied to modern wars as well. It's an angry, driving song, and Darren's vocals, in my opinion, are a standout here. His almost enraged screaming in the chorus really drives the point home, and the video piles this on further, unlike some of their more vague or surreal videos. Faceless troops with helmets ominously reading "Buy, Obey, Die, God, and Truth" march by as they play and people dance. You'll notice that System will use this theme again in a future video, and they seem quite keen on perhaps calling out the bad habit of people not noticing the things around them. The words flashing on the helmets are very likely a reference to the legendary movie They Live, which features the lead character finding a pair of glasses which reveal subliminal messages that permeate society, and a hidden alien elite controlling the world. In the case of the B.Y.O.B video, the fans having a real good time at the party are indoctrinated by these helmets that appear on their faces, which seem to be hypnotizing them with television programming, a message very similar to the one from Sugar. At the end, even the band themselves are affected. Question was the band's second single and video, and this one is probably my personal favorite System of a Down track. It was chosen to be a single when they found out that radio stations were already playing it. It's a majestic song with a fantastic use of Serge and Darren's tandem vocals and a great tempo change, going from a more sweeping, heavy sounds to an explosive, up-tempo sonic attack. It closes with an iconic fake-out ending, which slows things down again before one more explosion of energy. The music video is one of their more surreal, story-based ones. A young, pale boy in a school uniform walks down an alley, seeing a bright red bird perched on top of a wall, which he proceeds to slingshot. The narrative then transitions to a series of mini-scenes in a theater. A young girl dreams of a man and woman arguing on a stage with a snowy backdrop. She's later seen picking berries in a forest with a boy about her age, but eating one of these berries rapidly ages her up, making her realize that she was the distressed woman from the dream. The band, dressed up sharply in suits, seem to be the orchestra for this surreal play. When the woman passes away on a sacred-looking stone, the man is overcome with grief. And the ending is a mysterious mix of a modern hospital room, the play, the bird, and a final shot of a baby.
The meaning is anything but concrete, but it seems to play on the cyclical nature of life, much like the video for Spiders.
According to Serge, the vague messaging is very much intentional. It's kind of cool to not fully know, because then you can take a fresh approach and just feel the emotions rather than the logic of what's going on, and that's really powerful. Now, we know that the band had run into issues in the past, getting banned from radio stations, though by no fault of their own. There would be an instance, however, where they may have decided to push the buttons of some television execs a little too hard. I can't discuss System of a Down, Mezmerize, and B.Y.O.B without bringing up the Saturday Night Live incident that took place on May 7th, 2005. With Jackass's Johnny Knoxville hosting, one might have expected the entire episode to go off the rails, but the night went on without issue. It seemed all was quiet. The band performed 2 songs that night, B.Y.O.B off the yet-to-be-released Mezmerize, and their hit song Aerial. Given that the show was live, the broadcast technician on hand had to live censor any profanity, of which B.Y.O.B has a fair amount during its chorus. This was a common practice for live TV at the time. A several-second delay was typically used to allow networks to censor any inappropriate content that might slip through. The song went off without a hitch until the end. It seemed to be a clear jab at the censors. The broadcast technician had reportedly memorized the song to ensure that it could be censored accurately and was not prepared to bleep that little interjection, so it went through in all of its glory. SoaD discussed the incident with K-Rock.
Not kicked off, but we got banned, like, you know, at the time. I don't know what the situation is now, but we were asked to perform B.Y.O.B. I mean, that's a big event for us, man. SNL,
Huge.
that's legendary, epic.
Huge.
You know, I was gonna say epic S. So during the song, we were told not to cuss. I don't know how it happened. It slipped, but as it slipped, it was Darren. And as he said it, he dropped the F-bomb. The camera was straight on his face, and so it went live for half the country right away. They missed the button.
Bands trolling censors on live TV is nothing new. Iron Maiden, Faith No More, and Metallica all stuck it to the networks in various ways over the years, just to name a few. If anything, it's all in the spirit of punk and metal to push against censorship whenever possible. Sorry, I'm not getting away with that on YouTube. The viewers at home weren't particularly bothered by this, as the show aired close to midnight, so there weren't that many children watching. However, it should be no surprise that the executives involved were less than amused and subsequently banned them from the show. As of this recording, they have not been back. Later on in 2005, the band would release the other half of their double album.
The whole idea started off with when I closed my eyes and this abstract painting started happening. And then I realized that The cover of the album Hypnotize is all done in paint, which Darren's dad did, which is amazing.
Like Mezmerize, Hypnotize was a powerful offering. One standout favorite off this album has to be Holy Mountains. Holy Mountains is a heavy song lyrically. It's one of the many that deal with the Armenian genocide. Serge spoke about it in an interview with Metal Hammer. The Armenian genocide may be political to the rest of the world, but to us it's personal. We all have grandparents that lived through the atrocity. It's our family tree, or the lack of it, that motivates us to talk about it. Everyone in System, other than the Hollywood-born Darren, came to America when they were kids. Serge's family came over from Beirut. As he dryly notes, there was a Lebanese civil war going on, which made it not very fun to be there. I'm sure my parents were motivated by the economic opportunities and a more comfortable living environment for their kids. I've spent most of my life in the US. I'm 38, and I was 8 when I left Lebanon, so it's been a huge part of my life. I am an American, I am an Armenian, and I'm also a soul on this planet who doesn't want to identify with any borders or flags. The first single off the album, the very melodic and radio-friendly title track, Hypnotize, would not only reach #1 on Billboard's modern rock tracks, but become the band's biggest international hits to date.
I'm just sitting in my car and waiting for my...
The video was a simple live concert affair for the most part, opening with a helicopter sprinkling something on the city before cutting to the band's performance. Near the end, we learn what the helicopter was sprinkling, as we see a huge mural of the album cover from overhead as the helicopter flies away. The second single, Lonely Day, later appeared in the 2007 suspense thriller Disturbia, which is an awesome suburban reimagining of Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window. The song is a perfect fit for a montage where the protagonist grows restless under house arrest, even resorting to building a tower of Twinkies just to pass the time. The music video was its own entity, however. As people walk through the city, the band is riding their tour bus doing mundane things like reading, drawing, or listening to music. All the areas they pass through are subject to a sort of mundane chaos. Despite fires cropping up all over the city, they, or perhaps we, continue to go about our daily lives, going through the grind while blindly ignoring craziness and ever-growing danger. As an LA resident, it sometimes do be like that, but I think this video may be a commentary about class disparity. The wealthy stars don't even notice how common the suffering of the average person has become. This slow and somber song is notable for Darren taking a lot of the lead vocal duties, with Serge joining in for the chorus, the reverse of what they usually do. Given Hypnotize was the second half of a whole, the tracks keep that energy going, though they are, of course, still their own entities. Stealing Society, which I wish got a lot more love because it's one of the best songs ever, seems to sing about the excesses of society. It goes from a heavy, groovy piece and breaks down into some of Serge and Darren's harmonies in an almost punk rock breakdown. U-Fig is another one that's close to my heart. I think it too flies a little bit under the radar. Its soft melodic opening explodes into a riff-filled nearly 3 minutes with Serge and Darren once again hitting those amazing harmonies that are so prevalent on the album, with the song flowing between soft and heavy with ease. Hypnotize, just like Mezmerize, debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200. While I mentioned earlier that picking a favorite album from System of a Down is nearly impossible, and my opinion is constantly changing because all 5 are cream of the crop, lately, Hypnotize has been at the top of my list the most, and for that reason, I am giving it the honor of being System of a Down's magnum opus. The touring continued, with the band performing at regular shows and festivals across the US and internationally introducing a full European tour. They went back to Ozfest in 2006 and got the slot right before Ozzy himself. But sadly, the band would end up going on hiatus. The rest of the 2000s passed, and nothing was recorded. The band was having a few internal issues that they were not too shy about discussing. Creative differences had started to rear their head. Well, in truth, System had always had some internal friction, but they had always managed to work through it. It just got to the point where creative minds were clashing a little more often, and it began to affect the guys' writing as a whole. For bands with a long-running, stable lineup like System, where they only had a few personnel changes very early on in their career, getting sick of each other is something you have to worry about. Sometimes bands can be like family, and family doesn't always see eye to eye. Screamers was a documentary directed by Carla Garapedian, which features interviews and discussions with System of a Down members, discussing genocide, including the Armenian genocide. In the documentary, Serge discusses his grandfather's survival during those times. The documentary is definitely worth a watch, though it's not an easy watch, but it does have a lot of information and history that generally isn't taught in schools. You can see how much it all means to the band. Now, as I explained earlier, Darren and Serge had a little bit of creative friction. A Serge interview with Metal Hammer discusses some of it.
I was desperate to collaborate, to be creative, but everything within the band felt rigid and inflexible.
If I mentioned that I had a song that I wanted to take a crack at, Darren would never outright refuse, but it was always, let's work on that one next week, or how about we finish up this batch of songs first. We rarely ever seemed to get to my songs. vocals. While the two worked well together for a decade, it seemed that Darren's wish to push the music in one direction started to overtake Serge's. Darren, seeing himself as the primary songwriter for the band, wanted to push forward with his vision, but Serge wished to also have equal say in matters. This seemed to be a catalyst that not only pushed the hiatus, but also the band delving into more of their side projects. In 2006, Chavo had gotten a side project together called SoaD. This one involved Wu-Tang Clan founder RZA, Kinetic 9, and the Reverend William Burke. They formed around 2005 when System first went on hiatus, and had a song called Deuces featured in the 2008 movie Babylon AD. The act would end up going on hiatus themselves sometime around 2008, but it wouldn't be left on the sidelines forever. SoaD is more of a hip-hop oriented act, and Chavo's fellow SoaD bandmates were all veterans of the hip-hop scene. Serge kept busy as well. In 2007, he released his first solo album, Elect the Dead. John Dolmayan shows up on drums as a guest, and the album itself, while being a rock album, is more progressive, and features more music that ties to his Armenian roots, though still sounds closer to System of a Down than some of his future works. Serge discussed the first solo album in a 2000 interview with the Artisan News Service.
Friends of mine that have heard it say that it reminds them of the times of old before modern civilization and certain things of, I can't really explain it. It's easier for me to talk about other people's music than my own in some ways, but it's definitely got, you know, a lot of instruments. The sound is very deep. There's a lot of layers of guitar and pianos and acoustic guitars and, you know, a lot going on.
Elect the Dead debuted at number 4 on the Billboard 200, showing that the fans were interested in what the guys were doing even while their main band was on hiatus. Now, remember when I mentioned Darren jamming a little bit back around 2003? He has a side project called Scars on Broadway, or as it's now known, Darren Malakian and Scars on Broadway. It's a more rock-driven act with inspirations from David Bowie to Roxy Music. Darren explained some of his inspirations. I consider myself a medium to it all. There's something there, and then there's a song, and then there's me. A lot of times, I don't feel responsible for the songs myself, but that's my job or my place in life, to keep my search and catch ideas before they pass me by. Scars on Broadway released their first self-titled full-length album in 2008. The lineup included his old System bandmate and friend John on drums, along with Danny Shamoun on keyboard and Frankie Perez on backing vocals. Scars is very close to System of a Down, probably the closest thing we've gotten out of all the band members' side projects. Musically, you can hear some similarities to the material on Mezmerize and Hypnotize. While Serge's solo material branched out a lot more, Darren's kept firmer to its rock and metal roots. It hit number 17 on the Billboard 200, and number 2 on the hard rock charts to boot. I don't want to get into them too much here, but I think we'll be seeing and perhaps talking about these guys more in the future. Finally, in 2010, it happened. After the various side projects, Serge even released another album this year titled Imperfect Harmonies, documentaries, and everything else, the band would announce its reunion. On November 29th, 2010, the band announced the end of their hiatus. Well, partially, but they did announce on their website that they'd be reuniting to play live once again. Fans rejoiced upon hearing the words on their website. We are excited to announce that System will be playing some dates together in 2011. We also wanted to thank you for your loyalty and support, not only to System of a Down, but to all of our solo efforts as well. We have no master plan of sorts. We're playing these shows simply because we want to play together again as a band, and for you, our amazing fans. We look forward to seeing all of you. The reunion tour kicked off on May 10, 2011 in Alberta, Canada. They had a 29-song set list, opening with Prison Song and ending, as always, with Sugar. The rust would soon be shaken off as their shows started to take on the old sheen that they used to have. But, more importantly, I got to see them live for the first time in my life during their stop at the Allstate Arena in Illinois in August 2012. At that age, waiting 7 years to see my favorite band felt like forever, and I was glad to have a chance to be able to see them with my school friends before heading off to college. I was careful not to miss my next chance, which came in July 2013 at the Hollywood Bowl. They had another strong set list here, over 20 songs, and besides a cover of Angel Baby from Rosie and the Originals, they played some songs that they hadn't performed since the 2000s, like Peephole and X, which hadn't been played since 2002, or ADD and D-Devil, which hadn't been played since 2003. Serge also had 2 solo albums come out during their 2011-2013 touring season, Harakiri and Orca. Harakiri has a bit more of a System vibe, where Orca had Serge delving into his more eclectic taste, going a lot more experimental with the sound. The band would keep playing through 2013 and even do a few dates in 2014. While it was good for the guys to do some shows again, drummer John Dolmayan expressed that just touring wasn't fully scratching the itch he had as a musician, and so he started his own solo project called These Gray Men, using a Kickstarter to raise funds for a cover album, with plans to provide a new take on classics from the likes of Radiohead, Outkast, and more. This would not come to fruition for quite some time, however, so let's put a plug there and revisit it. It would be almost 2 years before I saw System again in April 2015 on the Wake Up the Souls tour. And if I gave out a separate magnum opus award for the best tour, I'd be giving it to this one. It was an insanely epic show.
Are you ready to wake up the soul?
This tour wasn't just notable for me, it was extremely important to the band, who commemorated their journey to the 100th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide. The band created a community around the performances on Facebook, which allowed fans to interact and spread awareness about both the tour and its meaning, and a Take Action page allowed fans to send tweets to urge for justice regarding the Armenian Genocide. But the most memorable part of this tour still stands tall as a truly career-defining moment. System of a Down's most important show on the Wake Up the Souls tour, if not their entire careers, may well have been on April 23rd, 2015, at the Republic Square in Yerevan, Armenia. The concert was free for their homeland, taking place on the exact date of the genocide, which took the lives of over 1.5 million Armenians a century prior. It was the final stop on the tour, and it was their first show ever performed in their home country, and it did not disappoint. It went on for nearly 2.5 hours, with the band playing nearly 40 songs,
opening with Holy Mountains,
and ending, as always, with Sugar. The setlist spanned their entire career, with every album well represented. The performance was broken into 3 parts, with video intermissions in between. Despite the rain, 40,000 people came and stayed for this epic tribute to their ancestors. The band occasionally spoke to the audience in Armenian, and there were emotional moments. The entire thing is on YouTube. If you're a SoaD fan, which you probably are if you've watched this far into the video, I definitely recommend a watch. I did see them one more time in 2015 during Riot Fest back in Chicago. There was a huge rainfall the day before, and they had to start and stop playing multiple times because people kept slipping and falling into the mud. Several of those who went down were trampled by fans still trying to rush forward who couldn't see what was going on a few rows ahead of them. Let's just say the Riot Fest ambulances got a lot of use that night.
It's extremely awkward to sing when there are people who look like they're dying right in front of me.
Unfortunately, someone also stole my phone when everyone was packed in like a bunch of sardines, so I don't even have pictures of this one. Still had a good time though. I think it goes without saying that I'd love to see them again sometime soon. But enough about live shows. What about new music? 2015 also brought some attempts to release some new material, according to Serge in a more recent interview with Loudwire Nights.
We got together in the rehearsal studio and we were jamming them out for potentially releasing them, but we kind of decided not to at the time. There's a story having to do with that. We played it for our producer Rick Rubin, and he didn't know if the first thing that we should release from System after being inactive for so many years were these songs, and I think that dissuaded the guys from releasing the 2 songs, Darren's song and my song. And so I decided to release it on my own.
And then, in what could have become one of the biggest bombshells yet, 2017 could have resulted in the band getting a new singer. I know this one might be hard to fathom, but Serge was willing to leave so that the rest of the band could move on. He had invited the bands to a business meeting, then after getting some basic things out of the way, came clean about how touring was something that was no longer in his vision. Part of the issue was his back, which had been troubling the singer, who had turned 50 years old in August of that year. But he understood that this was the band's dream, and he felt like he was holding them back. He spoke about this in his book, Down with the System. We can be the unique band that's able to make this transition amicably, where the member of the band who's leaving is 100% on board with the new direction. I'll do press and talk about it positively. I'll make it clear that I support you guys. I don't think the guys were totally shocked by my announcement. He went on to explain that they didn't dismiss the idea outright, but asked him to pump the brakes and not announce a departure from the band. Touring from that point basically happened whenever Serge felt that he was up to it, and he kind of forgot about the whole idea of replacing himself until about a year later. John, Shavo, and I were at a fundraiser in Glendale, and the singer I knew got up and sang this beautiful Armenian song. Shavo was sitting next to me at the table. He leaned over and tapped me on the shoulder. By the way, he nodded toward the singer, we tried this guy out as a singer. The only problem was he couldn't scream and growl. I was taken aback. Not that they had been auditioning replacements, but that they'd kept it a secret. Serge suggested that they just take this guy into the parking lot and teach him to growl so they could move on without him. It's very hard for me to imagine this band with a different singer, and at that point I'm not even sure it's worth releasing under the System of a Down moniker, but they never did go through with it, or any other suggestion that Serge had. Despite him being on a different page, they couldn't part ways with him in the end, and it turned out that their touring arrangement would work out for the time being. Throughout the rest of the 2010s, in the midst of touring, the other members besides Serge still continued with some of their solo endeavors, and not all of them were music-based. John, an avid fan and collector of comic books, opened a brick-and-mortar store, Torpedo Comics, which specializes in rare and hard-to-find titles. They opened their doors in 2016. And I can't forget about Scars on Broadway. A decade later, just when we all thought that band was dead too, their sophomore album, Dictator, was released. This was in 2018 during System's recording hiatus. this. It's worth noting that Dictator included material that was meant for System of a Down. Darren discussed how the band had rehearsed the song live with System once or twice and considered releasing it, but they never did. In reality, there was more internal conflict than any of the members of System had initially let on, but those deteriorating relationships went public in early 2019. It seems John and Serge have had their political differences over the years. While both men are staunchly behind their Armenian heritage and their rights, they fall on opposing ends when it comes to American politics. John has stated that his opinions have caused him to lose friends. The biggest blow-up happened in January 2019 when John posted this inflammatory IG post about his opposing American political party, leading Serge to publicly accuse him of fascism. I'm not going to get into the granular details of their social media spat here, cause that's cringe, but basically they went back and forth arguing on the internet, each of their posts getting longer and longer, while also getting more pointed and nastier. No matter what your views are, it's not a good look for a group often labeled as a political metal band to be so misaligned when it comes to politics, even if it is just American politics. Serge, meanwhile, talked about how John's opinions have frustrated him, but he also defended John from attacks that came from online due to his statements. John has become pretty outspoken online, leading to feelings that his differing opinions have lost him both fans and professional opportunities. I just imagine in his Instagram lives he sees himself as a real-life Eric Olas. In any event, John and Serge have both maintained that they still care about each other and respect each other's opinions, even if they don't agree on things very often these days. Maybe his perceived outcasting lit a fire under the drummer though. As of 2020, John was the only member of the group not to actually release a solo record of his own. But in February 2020, his band, These Gray Men, finally released that self-titled cover album. It consisted of reworked songs and a whole slew of special guests, everyone from Serge to M. Shadows of Avenged Sevenfold, and even Tom Morello of Rage Against the Machine.
It really was a grassroots kind of thing, and that like developed very slowly. It would be 2 a.m, I'd be driving back to Las Vegas from LA, and random songs would be coming up. I'd always wanted to do something, like a cover album, but never really had the opportunity to do it.
Also in 2020, Shavo started another side project called North Kingsley with fellow musicians Ray Hawthorne and Saro Paparian, releasing their first song, Like That, later this year. While Acho Zen was more strongly in the hip-hop camp, North Kingsley melds hip-hop, rock, and metal together.
Talk about it, way that you been all about it, work around the way that you could cheat away your own death. I don't wanna talk about it when he only fall about it, I can see it selling my soul for the protest.
The band, which derives its name from a street in Little Armenia, has not yet, at the time of this recording, released a full-length album. But for System, things had been quiet on the recording front for some time. That all changed 15 years after their last studio album, when something happened that brought the four back together again for something more than just playing live.
We haven't recorded anything together in 15 years. Since the Hypnotize album. It took something grand like this. John sent a text, was like, dude, we gotta do something, and it just went from there.
System of a Down have always been outspoken in their support for Armenia and its people, as well as raising awareness of the Armenian genocide. Their old website even included a bit of history for people who didn't know what happened. The cause has always been intensely personal for them, and when an attack on Artsakh happened during the height of the COVID pandemic, the four vowed that something had to be done, and they knew just what that was going to be. So they got together again, only instead of touring, they finally released new music after a decade and a half of silence. 2 songs were recorded as double A-side singles, Protect the Land and Genocidal Humanoidz. Darren explained it succinctly in the behind-the-scenes video.
For me, this is all personal and emotional. It's our country, it's our history, it's our land. So I don't have anything really political or anything like that to say. It's just, I'm proud of these songs. I'm proud of the band for getting together and doing this. And I hope it brings some attention to the situation, because we're not getting much.
Genocidal Humanoidz is probably one of the band's angriest songs, up there with the likes of Attack or Deer Dance, but it still stands out. Incorporating musical influences from all over, thrash metal, speed metal, and even black metal, complete with a full-on blast beat, Serge and Darren trade vocal duties just like they did in 2005, spinning together a tale of fighting oppressors, hope, and refusing to back down in the face of the enemy. The music video, which is co-directed by Shavo, features the band performing in glorious 4K, but its main story is told through a stunning, mostly black and white animation punctuated with bits of color. Much like Spielberg's Holocaust movie Schindler's List. A boy runs through a war-ravaged city and picks a flower to put on what seems to be a family member or someone close to him who did not make it. A kind of awesome-looking devil thing chases the boy, who at first begins to run, but then stands his ground as the devil multiplies, with his only weapon a slingshot. Kind of like the boy from Question. The symbolism here is strong, clearly showing that one must stand up against evil even if you're outmatched. The other single, Protect the Land, deals with the same topic. Both songs were recorded in tandem to bring attention to their homeland. Paying respect to the people who had to defend themselves from attacks from much bigger armies, Protect the Land is quite literal in its lyrics as well, and the video pulls no punches. While Genocidal Humanoidz told a story through animation, this time they hit you in the face with horrifying scenes of war and the people fighting for their freedom. Not only troops, but doctors and teachers donning military uniforms to join the fight. Interspersed with these scenes, the band is shown against background colors and washed in light with the colors of the Armenian flag. It not only showed Armenians, but people from around the world supporting the cause at various protests. All digital proceeds from these songs went directly to the Armenia Fund, a charity that provides for those in Armenia and Artsakh. Between Bandcamp and YouTube, the band raised over $600,000 for the charity. Musically, after such a long hiatus, the band had returned with 2 very solid songs. They'd both feel right at home on Mezmerize or Hypnotize, like the band had not lost a beat in 15 years. I'd perhaps like to see them innovate their sound a little bit past these if another full-length were to come along, but these 2 were certainly welcome for a content-starved System fan. Me. I'm talking about me. As of writing, the band has not released any new music together for the past 5 years, but the members themselves have been keeping busy, with each of the 4 members leading their own projects. Some of these have been going on for years at this point, and some were even going on during the time System of a Down was actively recording. Despite the recent resurgence of System, the reopening coffin of these South Caucasus superstars would be slammed shut by another extended period of inactivity.
Because obviously we still have something to give to the world. When you put something out that actually makes an impact, and then I go down the rabbit hole of frustration and anger, I'm a sensitive person, so I can't just hold this stuff in. It has to come out one way or the other. And it takes me a long time to deal with it and to cope with it, because I also am realistic in that life is finite. You know, you only have a certain amount of time, and here we are, we have this gift, right? That came from God or wherever, you know, whatever, and we're squandering it.
SoaD offered up some of his own insights in a 2024 interview, where he discusses how he and the guys did have a few chats about things, with SoaD inviting Darren over to his house more than once for dinner. They'd play each other music they had written, and SoaD even took notes, putting together something he jokingly called a manifesto, mentioning things that he'd like to see with the band, like a more egalitarian system where they each had a say in the song. The band even got together while SoaD was away in New Zealand, and they sent him a rehearsal tape of them jamming on a few of those songs. However, these types of sessions didn't lead to any new material past 2020.
A lot of those are Darren's songs, and some of them he may have released recently, and some of those are my songs, which I released probably on Elasticity. So that's the story. I mean, there is no record.
In recent years, everyone has continued to do their own thing. The biggest System news of 2023 was the inclusion of Shimmy and Toxicity in the rhythm game Fortnite Festival. Things were not looking promising if Darren and SoaD's vocal harmonies are something you're looking forward to. And what happened next in 2024 might have put the possibility of a comeback album just out of reach. With no new movement on the front of new System of a Down music, SoaD at least offered something for the fans to consume by releasing a book, Down with the System, a memoir of sorts, released in May of 2024. It discusses his time as a musician along with other thoughts and stories from his life. In fact, some of SoaD's inspiration for his next EP, Foundations, came from the constant referencing to old songs while writing the book. Foundations released in September of 2024, and contained songs that SoaD had started to form over 2 decades ago, some even predating System of a Down. Like System, SoaD also brings attention to his Armenian roots in songs like Justice Will Shine On. One song from the EP, titled AF Day, was originally written for System of a Down. SoaD's solo material is probably enough to fill a video of its own. In addition to everything that I've talked about, he's released numerous live albums, EPs, singles, and music videos, and has appeared on various soundtracks for video games, movies, and TV. There are definitely moments of his solo career that I like, but despite this being the side project that has System of a Down's frontman, it just doesn't have that SoaD magic, or the sweet sounds of Darren Malakian's Ibanez Iceman guitar, which is right behind me, right there. Oh, in addition to everything that I have listed, he's very serious about coffee. He developed his own brand, pronounced Kavet Coffee, literally the Armenian word for cup, and even opened a cafe under the same name in LA back in July 2024. I do not drink caffeine, so I've never been there. 2024 also saw Shavo arrange yet another side project, this one titled 7 Hours After Violet, or SHAV, a play on his name. Their first live show was in July, and they released their debut album in October of that year. While his previous thing, North Kingsley, has that hip-hop influence, 7 Hours is more of a metalcore act. While this one is definitely more up my alley than his previous solo shots, the fact that Shavo had to form a new band to get his metal fix may not be a good sign for System.
2024 and 2025 also saw Scars on Broadway making their once-per-decade contribution as Darren began putting out singles for a third studio album, Addicted to the Violence.
And despite John Dolmayan seeming to be the one who really wants to get the band back together, he's been up to his own stuff too. The next step for him after opening his own comic book store was creating his own comics, titled Dead Samurai and Essentia. The few personal differences they have seem to be ironed out, or at the very least, not public anymore, but some of the creative differences obviously still remain. It's interesting that while the band members are all still on the same page when it comes to their homeland and they're all on speaking terms with one another, they tend to clash when it comes to almost anything else. Maybe that's just to be expected when you've shared a stage and tour bus for the better part of 30 years. But even now, Serj is not ruling out the future. Darren defines himself as the primary songwriter for System. It's important to him. Will that ever change? I don't know. But I don't see it negatively anymore because I understand it better. That doesn't mean I have to create music in that capacity. As for a future System record, the saying goes, nobody knows. Darren doesn't seem so optimistic as of a February 2025 interview stating that he's not sure he wants to do a new System album anymore due to the amount of time passed since Mezmerize and Hypnotize, but if we're reaching for any positive sign, I guess he never says no outright. System of a Down have a bond that goes beyond just being in a band. From their start at the Armenian-American high school, the four have always put their country and their ties to it first, and are able to, at least somewhat, put their differences aside when the world really needs to hear their message. They are touring again in 2025. And while I'm certainly not hoping for anything bad to happen in terms of world events, it's good to know that if injustice strikes again, the four metal legends from Armenia could arise. Arise as did the gods Ninti and Ishkur. Ishkur, motherfucker! And I think the world tends to be a better place with more System of a Down. For more band history, make sure you stay plugged in by subscribing to Pumpkin Metal for more than just punk and metal, and let the bell toll for notifications. Until then, mic drop.